Hello, everybody. This is Heidi from What Can I Do? Education Department, and we're continuing our discussion on governments and economic systems through history, psychology, etc. And in the psychological discussion, we talked about strong men and we talked about heroes, and we developed some theories about strong men and heroes, and we're applying some of that and further developing that in this class and the next, this course and the next. This one is going to be focused on individual states in the United States, and the last one will be on countries around the world. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk about different people from different states. Some are strong men, some are heroes, some are controversial. And like we said before, a hero to one person might be a strong man to another. A tyrant in one situation might be the savior in yet another. So I'm going to very quickly address each state, talk about 1, 2, or possibly 3 figures that were key to that state. And I'm going to focus mostly in this introduction on figures that are more known nationally, not just regionally. And then further coursework in this area would focus, maybe a person would focus in on one state or one figure or one type of figure or one region. Depends on the level of coursework, of course, in the person's interests. So this is a survey class. This is meant to give out the lay of the land, not to do anything that's in any kind of depth. Also, the thing I've been told that some of what I've done so far is somewhat USA centric, and that may well be. That's a little bit harder for me to pick out since I've really basically spent my whole entire life here in the United States. And while I've read pretty extensively and talked to people and tried to develop a global perspective, I'm still a United States citizen. And if I've said something that is incorrect or you have a different perspective on, say so. It's going to be the same thing with the California perspective. So I'm saying this before I discuss everyone's states. Okay, so getting started here. States, strong men and heroes. Alabama, notably George Wallace, the segregationist governor. I was young when he was the racist and got shot and ended up in a wheelchair and felt bad and saw the error of his ways. I think he was more successful in his area as a racist, but he didn't really get anywhere after, did he? No. I don't know. I imagine some people never forgot he was a racist, and some people never forgot that he had been a racist. Anyway, also from Alabama, Rosa Parks, a civil rights icon, Montgomery bus boycott. But here you go. That's what I'm talking about. George Wallace may have been a hero to some people. They voted for him for governor when he was a racist, and he was obviously a tyrant or a strong man to others. And when he switched up, he really didn't get any strong allegiance. Rosa Parks, for me, she's most obviously a hero, standing up for people who needed just that, a hero, people who were being oppressed. But perhaps from the perspective of the bus company, racists, whatever, I don't know that she would be considered a tyrant or a strong man in any possible twist of anything, but I can see where she might not be a hero to some people. I will not say what I think of those people at the moment. Alaska had Wally Hickel, who was a 2-term governor. He was an oil pipeline advocate. Once again, probably a hero to some people, particularly financiers and people who benefited from having the energy, but at the same time to the native people, I doubt very much the man was a hero. I doubt very much that he's a hero to conservationists today. Arizona brought us Barry Goldwater, a conservative icon, a senator, a presidential candidate. I don't know if people thought he was a hero. I'm sure that he was well admired in Arizona. Not probably. I would have put maybe John McCain on this list as a hero. Different eras, different kind of hero. Barry Goldwater was a a conservative, I want to say dyed in the wool, but a traditional conservative, I guess you could say, an iconic conservative, whereas John McCain considered himself to be a maverick. So I don't know. Evan Meacham was a controversial governor. He was impeached. So there again, he must have been something. He got enough votes to be governor, but he obviously messed up and was impeached. Was he a hero? I bet some people would say yeah. Arkansas. Orville Phobos, a segregationist. He was involved in the Little Rock Central High crisis. I don't know who he was in that. Was he a superintendent? I don't know. I'd have to look that up. But he was a segregationist, therefore, in my book, not a decent person. But again, I don't have enough information to say strongman tyrant. Bill Clinton was a governor, then a president. He was somewhat of a hero to many people. He was also despised by many people. And now looking back, my goodness, from the lens of today, what can we say about somebody who took advantage of many young women sexually while he had power over them or a powerful position? It's hard to say how that's too much different from Jeffrey Epstein, except for the age of the known victims at this point, right? California, Peter Burnett was the first governor, and being that he, led California into statehood, was more than likely a hero again to some people, but he was also known for his genocidal Indian policies. His cruelty and allowance of the genocide of Native Americans makes him a strongman or a tyrant in my estimation. Hiram Johnson was a progressive reformer. Well, progressive back in the day might not seem heroic today. He broke the railroad monopoly, which I don't see that there's anything wrong with that, but I don't know what happened afterwards. And if he was progressive in terms of economic egalitarianism, I can't complain. Earl Warren was a governor and then Supreme Court Chief Justice, and he was a well-known and well-admired, his court was well-admired, kind of unlike today's. And I would say that he would be considered a hero. But then if I look at the Heritage Foundation, for example, they might have found that he, along with the Democrats that came after him, were all tyrants. I mean, if you think about it, Barack Obama was widely considered to be overstepping his power boundaries with his executive orders. And if you can take racism out of the picture, which you can't, but if you can, then you might see that the right saw Barack Obama the way that some people on the left are seeing Donald Trump, and you might want to both sidesism that. But again, you can't. And then there's Ronald Reagan, widely considered a hero in conservative circles. They still talk about the Reagan Party, and it was a whole era, and take down that wall and all that, and the beacon on the hill. I don't know. He did some of that. He did the city on the hill. I don't know. He and Bush, they had different. Obviously, I was not a conservative, especially back then. No, especially now. I'm not a conservative. But see, Reagan also did terrible things. Again, in my opinion, he changed the way in California that we treated the mentally ill. Maybe what we were doing sucked, but what he did sucked worse. He basically, we ended up with all the mentally ill people on the streets that are part of the beginnings of our homeless problems. It's a complicated topic. Colorado had a territorial governor during the Sand Creek Massacre. I want to say again, you've got a hero, I'm sure, to some people who was governor during a massacre, and depending on how he handled it, he probably wasn't a very decent person. By contrast, there's Ben Nighthorse Campbell, who is a senator who has Northern Cheyenne heritage. It doesn't say anything about him. I don't know how he voted. But the idea that he got to be a senator is awfully different than a governor during a massacre of Native Americans anyway. In Connecticut, There was Thomas Hooker, the founder of Hartford, considered the father of Connecticut, which implies to me he was a hero. I do not know anything that he did. I will pretty much guarantee you, however, that as much as he was a hero in Connecticut, he wasn't a hero to the Native Americans there then. Jonathan Trumbull Sr. was a Revolutionary War governor, and I'm going to say the same. I don't care who he was a hero to. It's clear who he was not a hero to. In Delaware, Caesar Rodney signed the Declaration of Independence. That can make him a hero. I mean, declaring independence, obviously all those people were heroes to Americans. I say with this hesitation, the Declaration of Independence didn't include anybody other than white men. I don't care what they said. And yes, it was the basis for getting rights for everyone else, but that's not who these people were talking about. And Caesar Rodney was a product of patriarchy, racist, bigoted ideas. I'll just leave it at that for the moment. Thomas Garrett. Interestingly enough, Rhonda had some of her maternal family are Garretts. This particular Garrett was an Underground Railroad conductor, undeniably a hero, although I suppose he could have been a jerk in his private life too. But again, that makes it very difficult, because some people, like this guy's obviously this hero, but he could have beaten his wife. And I'm not casting aspersions on Thomas Garrett by a long shot. I am just pointing out that his public life makes him a hero, and that's all we know. We do have to look that up and see if there was a Thomas Garrett and if that's your relative. Mm-hmm. Meanwhile, in Florida, Andrew Jackson was a military governor. Seminole Wars. See, all the early heroes, almost all of them, were part of the genocide and owned slaves or didn't fight against having slaves or fight against other people having slaves. And the entire early part of this country was built on moving Native Americans out of the way or killing them, and having black people cut down things and build houses and nurse babies. We're nothing without that. So that's why I keep hesitating. It's pretty hard to have heroes from back then, unless they ran the Underground Railroad or helped with that or something. Anyway, Napoleon Bonaparte Broward, a progressive governor involved in drainage projects. Lovely for the people who were settling Florida. Not fabulous for the ecology and not fabulous for Native Americans. I think the Seminole probably were moved and drained.
Really?
Jeb Bush was down there, two-term governor, education reform. Jeb Bush was not enough of a hero to be elected to anything else. He obviously didn't do well enough as a governor to become the president or president-elect or anything, but he did do some education reform, and I would have to look into that before I disparaged it. Georgia, James Oglethorpe was the founder and first governor. Doesn't say anything, don't know. Clearly, if you're the first governor and you're allowing for a whole bunch of white people to settle somewhere and have a state and all that, you're a hero to somebody, probably, but I'm going to say almost all the politicians are also enemies of somebody. Then Eugene Talmadge was a political boss. That implies strongman to me when they put it that way and say political boss. I'm thinking of like Tammany Square and all the I guess there's Chicago and there's New York and there's San Francisco where they had kind of a machine. Probably right. LA too. My guess is every big city had something. Just some of them were famous and some not so much, right?
Right.
Tom Watson was a populist and then white supremacist politician. So populism, although it just means a lot of people like you, it's kind of a cult by personality expression. It's almost always used when somebody is a populist and does things that only the minority want. Like there's a large minority that they're popular with. I don't know if that's always the case, but that's how I keep hearing it. Then Jimmy Carter also came from Georgia, and I went to the Carter Center not too long ago. That man was a hero in my value system. He was a very kind man. He took care of people. He made sure that people who were left out were brought in. You have to go to the Carter Center. You could probably even go online, but I recommend it. Hawaii, King Kamehameha, I still said it wrong probably, Kamehameha. Boy, it's just that it's long and I'm old, I think, and it's harder to read it. Or I have to think about it harder. Kamehameha the First. And Queen Liliuokalani, the last Hawaiian monarch. I know that those two are definitely heroes to Native Hawaiians, and my guess is they're quasi-heroes to white people who live in Hawaii, unironically claiming that they like Hawaiian culture. And then Daniel Inouye was the senator for 49 years. 49 years. Now there's something else I noticed. Most of the states have senators who were there for a really long time. On the one hand, are they heroes? If they fought for the people and they were elected over and over, you can sort of make an argument for that. But then at the same time, you don't make room for younger people and you stay there making sure that everything goes your way for a really long time. That's kind of the mark of a strongman, to not leave. In Idaho, there was the Lion of Idaho, also implying a hero, William Borah, who was an isolationist senator. I'm guessing, I'd have to look, that the isolationist senator was probably like Wilson's time. Maybe somebody who supported Wilson before he got involved in the war. And I think the president, who is right before Wilson, because I thought he was an isolationist.
Yeah, right?
Don't remember for sure.
No.
Then Frank Church was a senator with the Church Committee investigations. Did you say you knew what those were?
I believe they were Watergate.
Watergate, okay. So another person who was a hero to some and unthrilled, did not thrill others. Illinois, here we have another Chicago political boss, a 21-year mayor of Chicago, Richard J. Daley. And if I remember right, he had like a son who was also the political boss, who was also Richard something else Daley. Then there was Abraham Lincoln. You've probably heard of Abraham Lincoln. He was a lawyer, a congressman, and of course our president. He was assassinated. You'll find an interesting number of heroes and strongmen both get assassinated. Something about putting yourself out there in the public and being controversial. In Indiana, they had William Henry Harrison, who was a territorial governor and president, and I imagine that he was somewhat heroic to some. He was elected, but he didn't make it for very long. They say he went outside or he got sick, whatever. He died in not that 53 days or something. Something. So Oliver Morton was a Civil War governor. He was a strong Union supporter, which makes him some kind of hero to some people. But you could imagine that people on the side of the Confederacy were probably not his biggest fans, right? Iowa, Robert Lucas was the first territorial or state governor. Don't know anything about him yet. James Grimes was an anti-slavery governor and a senator. For me, that makes James Grimes a hero. Caveat, if you just say that, that's one thing. But if you do something, vote some way, put yourself out there, that's another thing. Kansas, the hero John Brown, the abolitionist. Bleeding Kansas violence. Alf Landon, governor, and then was a presidential candidate in 1936. Kentucky spawned Henry Clay, the great compromiser. I always want to say gate. I don't know why. The great compromiser. He was a senator. He was the speaker, I imagine, speaker of the House. Definitely well known. Was he considered a hero? He was the great compromiser. I'm going to guess that people thought he was wonderful because he got things done. But I'm not so sure he could be a hero to too many people because he probably made everybody give up some of what they wanted. Abraham Lincoln's on this list as well because he was born in Kentucky. Louisiana, Huey Long, the Kingfish, a populist dictator. What a dictator? Well, that word populist again. I understand Huey Long was a rather controversial figure. Wasn't he involved with unions? No?
I'm not positive, to tell you the truth.
Well, we definitely have to look that up. Earl Long was Huey's brother. He was a 3-term governor. Interesting. So that connection was... And then Edwin Edwards was a 4-term governor with a corruption conviction. So it sounds like there was a bit of a political machine in Louisiana, too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Maine, James G. Blaine was a senator, the speaker, and a presidential candidate. Margaret Chase Smith, the first woman elected to both houses of Congress. Well, Margaret Chase Smith, why is that name extra familiar? Was she a treasurer? Did she sign money?
There was a Chase who was a treasurer.
Have to look that one up.
Yeah.
Margaret Chase Smith from Maine. Maryland, Spiro Agnew. He was the governor, and then he was the VP. See, now I've been saying that if you get elected, you must be a hero to somebody. But Spiro was no hero. He was like the original White House bagman. So, Homan's got nothing on Spiro Agnew. Massachusetts brought us John Adams and John Quincy Adams, the revolutionary and president, and the senator and president. Father and son. Right? Yeah, I think that's right. John F. Kennedy, senator and president. Another interesting figure, clearly was a hero to so much of this country, particularly after the Bay of Pigs. But he was enough of something to someone that they had him killed. So somebody wasn't happy with him. That doesn't mean they thought he was a strongman or a tyrant necessarily, but he was getting in someone's way. And then his brother Robert and his brother Ted were also involved with politics. Ted being a senator for 47 years, while Bobby, RFJ, Bobby Kennedy, Robert, RFK's dad, my goodness, RFK Jr.'s father, RFK Sr., was, I believe he was Secretary of State for John F. Kennedy and his campaign manager. And he definitely took a real turn toward being much more liberal and fighting for civil rights. And he was killed like months before Martin Luther King Jr., because I think he was killed in February, and I think Martin Luther King Jr. was killed in April.
Wow.
April 14th, I think that's right. I was never all that great with names and dates and those kinds of particulars. So when I say I think, I transpose numbers and I do different things. But when I'm talking concepts, I know who I'm talking about, what I'm talking about pretty well. Michigan had Henry Ford, the auto magnate, the one who brought us the, not so much just the cars, but the
assembly line.
The assembly line. All I could think of was conveyor belt, and I knew that wasn't right. The assembly line. And he transformed the state economy of Michigan. There again, somebody who was probably a hero to a lot of different people and workers, but he was a horrible racist. Definitely was one of those people pushing for us to be a more fascist country. Yeah, he's probably happy. Coleman Young was Detroit's first black mayor. Wow, 20 years. It just says 20 years, so I think that means 20 years as mayor, but that's quite a long time. G. Menon Williams was a 6-term governor and fought for civil rights. So it looks like they would grab onto somebody good and hang on to them. But again, that has a double-edged sword. All these people that stay in politics until they're old, we're seeing now what happens with that. So does that speak for term limits? But what if they're a hero? And what if they're really great? And what if the people want them? It's a conundrum. Minnesota had Hubert Humphrey and Walter Mondale and Jesse Ventura, which tells you a whole lot about how liberal Minnesota is, which tells you a whole lot about what's happening right now. Minnesota would never have voted for Donald Trump. I don't care what he says. He did not win Minnesota 3 times. Mississippi, Jefferson Davis, the man who was the president of the Confederacy. Was he a hero? He was a hero to Mississippi at that point. I don't know what people are thinking right now. I cannot speak for them. Definitely, he was not a hero to our Constitution. Wasn't much of a hero to Lincoln. Was he a strong man? I don't know how to answer that. I would have to find out more with the people. I don't know. I was going to say the people under him, but that's not necessarily the case. I don't think he's well known as being a tyrant. But what do you say when a gentleman tries to split apart your country? I don't know. I think it depends on what your values are about, do states really have the right to secede? Obviously not legally right now, but I think that it depends on what you think about the United States per se. I had a whole opinion on this before the last 10 years. And now as a Californian, I think I'm looking at that differently. But I really hate the idea that people were willing to secede from the Union in order to own slaves. That just sucks. Anyway, Mississippi also had Theodore Bilbo, who was a racist governor and senator. Ross Burnett, a segregationist who blocked Ole Miss integration. And Medgar Evers, civil rights leader who was assassinated. And I'm afraid that that little list tells you a whole lot about the history of old Mississippi. Oh, very difficult history. Missouri had Truman, Harry S. Truman. And what did the S stand for? Nothing. Truman had one of the hardest decisions anyone ever had to make. Did he make the right decision? He was a hero to a lot of people. He stopped the war, they say. But he fucking wasn't a hero to Hiroshima. Wasn't a hero to Nagasaki, even more so. Because once he dropped the bomb on Hiroshima, did he have to drop the bomb on Nagasaki? And once he saw what it did, how could he? So he was never a hero to me. From the time I was a child and learned about Nagasaki, I was appalled. Tom Pendergast, Kansas City political boss. Montana, Marcus Daly Copper. Copper King, I guess. That's so weird. Marcus Daly Copper King, a political boss. It's weird because the king isn't capitalized, but I don't think Marcus Daly Copper was a king, so. Jeanette Rankin, first woman in Congress, and she was a pacifist. Whew. The first woman in Congress from Montana as a pacifist, and out with it all, she's a hero. Just for that. I don't have to know anything else. I think, though, that we've learned that a person can be a hero and be a lot of other things, too, and some of them aren't nice. Nebraska gave us William Jennings Bryan, 3 times presidential candidate, a populist. Now, I thought, I don't know, a populist. Was he conservative? He was kind of conservative, too. But I don't remember hearing that he was a tyrant or anything. George Norris was a progressive senator. The TVA founder, the Tennessee Valley Authority, right? Yeah. Nevada, Patrick McCarran was a powerful senator and an anti-communist. Now, anti-communist is a very interesting thing to say, because an anti-communist can be a fascist. just like an anti-fascist can be a communist. Are you an anti-communist because you don't like what Stalin did, or you don't like the USSR, you don't like communist China? Or are you an anti-communist in the way of McCarthy, which means you're trying to root out liberalism? Paul Exalt was a governor and a Reagan confidant, and knowing what I know about Reagan and you knowing what you know about me, I'm not impressed with Paul Exalt. New Hampshire, Franklin Pierce, Senator and President. John Stark, Revolutionary War General. New Jersey, Frank Hague, a Jersey City political boss for 30 years. And Woodrow Wilson, the governor and then president. Wilson also had some tough choices to make. Because if I recall correctly, he was a bit of an isolationist, getting elected and then had to decide to enter the war after Lusitania was sunk. But the man who says he's an isolationist was sending supplies over in passenger ships, thinking he was going to sneak them on by, and then had to respond. The things we know now. New Mexico, Dennis Chavez, the first Hispanic senator, and Bronson Cutting, a progressive senator. But again, we don't know. We don't know what their policies were, how they voted, how they behaved. So we don't really know if they were heroes per se or not. I think it shows that there are not a whole bunch of famous people from New Mexico known nationally. I think that was redundant, but you know what I mean. New York saw Boss Tweed and Tammany Hall corruption. There's where Tammany Hall was, New York. I might have accidentally attributed it to Chicago because I don't know anything really about it. Just that little bit. But again, we had that political machine. Then the Roosevelts both came from New York. Both governors, both presidents. And that's funny, it's Theodore Roosevelt's a reformer, but Franklin Roosevelt, this is the man who had the New Deal, who I believe was one of the very beginnings of why people were so rapidly anti-communist, because they were trying to say that his leaning socialist type programs to pull us out of the Depression and pull people out of poverty, that goes back again to Salone, doesn't it?
Yes.
Yes. The guy that canceled the debt slavery back in Athens. Roosevelt, I think, was trying to do a form of that. And so was Biden with the student debt.
Correct. Because
a lot of presidents tend to bail out wealthy people and corporations because they seem to think that if those companies or people or corporations fail, the country loses its grounding. Economically, at least. And that might be true. I don't really know. New York has given us quite a lot of rich presidents. Nelson Rockefeller ran he was a vice president, and then Trump. I mean, New York has really sent us a lot of very wealthy people.
Right.
But if I remember right, again, Rockefeller was like Ford's VP or something, like he was a Republican.
Yeah.
Franklin Roosevelt was a Democrat, but Theodore, I think, was a Republican.
I think so.
Yeah. And then Robert Moses was an urban planner, an unelected power broker. New York, because of the money, and then California too, for that matter, to a certain extent, the money in these places, same with Illinois, Barack, the money in these states affects Washington, and I think that a lot of people have really responded to that. I think that's where a lot of complaining has come from. Texas, the Bushes, of course, they also were from Maine, and so there was even, but elite. What a shame. What a terrible shame that somebody who was able to get so much money from his father was able to convince people that he was a regular guy.
Yeah, right.
Bush did that too, though. They'd say, who would you rather have a beer with, right? And he was this rich kid. They both had golden spoons. Anyway, North Carolina, there was Jesse Helms. He was a conservative senator, and he was there for 30 years. I think conservative's an understatement. then Terry Sanford, was a progressive governor and was supported desegregation. So never rule out North Carolina. It's a purple state. North Dakota, William Langer was a populist governor and senator, and Quentin Burdick, a senator for 32 years. From this, we don't know very much, but I would say that overall North Dakota, probably quite conservative in general. Ohio, William McKinley was a governor and a president. Mark Hanna was a political boss and McKinley's manager, which tells you a lot about McKinley. All right, it doesn't tell you that much about McKinley, but also, isn't McKinley the one that had the tariffs? Wasn't he part of all that? That somebody has said that Donald found out about that, and then he was all interested in McKinley? The something Hawley tariffs?
Well, that was later.
Oh, okay. It was a different set of tariffs.
Yeah.
Well, for heaven's sake.
Yeah, those are the tariffs that
history does repeat. Which ones?
Smoot-Hawley.
Smoot-Hawley.
Helped bring along the Depression.
But McKinley's tariffs, not so much. He was also was he an expansionist? Is that one of the other things that Mount McKinley? So there is all that kind of stuff going on. Yeah, have to look up McKinley more because he seemed more of a minor president until lately. Mark Hanna, political boss. Reminder, we're in Ohio. James Rhodes, 4-term governor during the time of Kent State. If you don't know about Kent State, look it up. Doesn't really fit into this, but look it up. It fits into today's political atmosphere. So Oklahoma, Robert S. Kerr was a governor and a senator. He was also an oil baron. As we're doing this, really consider how much money went into politics and how much money comes from each of the states into national politics. Oregon, Tom McCall was an environmental governor. He apparently did something with beach access, my guess is for common people. Wayne Morse was a senator who opposed the Vietnam War. Oregon, from this, you can tell, was a more liberal state. The whole Pacific Northwest is more liberal in general than a lot of the country. Pennsylvania, Benjamin Franklin came from there. He was a founding father and a statesman. And like all of the early heroes, there was so much about him to say was heroic, and he was a Renaissance man type of person, a kind of jack of all trades. But didn't seem to speak out a whole lot about slavery, and I don't know if he owned slaves. I don't recall hearing that, or that he did really anything much to do. I do know that he was also a bit of a misogynist because he made some comments regarding women and sexuality that were not nice. James Buchanan was a senator and a president. Matthew Quay, Q-U-A-Y. If it were just an English word, it would be Key, but I don't know. Was a Republican political boss. William Scranton, probably the person for whom Scranton was named, was a governor and a presidential candidate. Or his family in any case. Rhode Island, Theodore Francis Green, a senator for 24 years. And Clybourne Pell, a senator for 36 years. The Pell Grants were named for this person. I think a guy, but I don't know. Clybourne, C-L-A-I-B-O-R-N-E. Clybourne. But senators, 24 and 36 years respectively. That's a place where ambitions go to relax. Go to settle in. South Carolina, John C. Calhoun was a vice president and a senator. That's where we ran into the nullification crisis that we're going to have to find out what that was. Strom Thurmond was a segregationist. He was a senator for 48 years. See, it wasn't only die-fi. They stay in there until they die-fi. I mean, that's not nice. They stay in the Senate until they fall over. Oh, McConnell. They do. And Benjamin Tillman was a government. I'm sure he was. He was a governor. I'm going to say that all again. Benjamin Tillman was a governor and a white supremacist senator. Okay, but I have a question. If he was a white supremacist senator, wasn't he also a white supremacist governor? I don't get how he was just a plain old governor, but then when he became a senator, he was a supremacist. I wonder how many people were politicians by day and wore robes at night. Judges by day wore robes at night. I have a feeling it's way more than I'd like to know. South Dakota, there was George McGovern. He was a senator and he ran for president in 1972. And Tom Daschle was a Senate Democratic leader. So that tells you that there was at least once a strong liberal party, strong liberal bastion in South Dakota that I don't know is particularly happening at this point. No, because that's where Kristi Noem is from. And she certainly wasn't heading over any kind of liberal anything. Yeah. In Tennessee, there's Andrew Jackson, senator, general, president, impeached. Sam Houston was a governor in Tennessee before moving to Texas. Clearly, Houston was named for Houston. Al Gore was also from Tennessee. So you definitely see that Tennessee also is also a purple state. Al Gore did not invent the internet, but Al Gore was one of the first people to really talk to us about climate change. This inconvenient truth. Shout out to Al Gore, who was proven very much right. So in Texas, then, of course, Sam Houston, Republic. Okay, I knew that. I just had forgotten that when it was Republic of Texas, Sam Houston was the president. Plus, he was also a governor of the state, and he's considered a big hero in Texas. Lyndon B. Johnson came from Texas. Again, showing Texas is another one that's a purple state. Johnson was definitely liberal. Johnson was bordering on being socialist with his Great Society. Johnson oversaw the Civil Rights Acts and a lot of the civil rights movement and supported things, you know. He was an interesting person. He chose not to run again because he knew he couldn't win. He saw the populism of Nixon, and he knew that the war was making him look very bad, and he'd made bad choices. He almost had a peace settlement, but Nixon made a decision to talk to the president or the leader of South Vietnam and got him to not accept it. So Johnson wasn't able to end the war, and that made Nixon look better by promising to end the war. Doesn't that help you love Nixon? Nixon was not a very nice man. John Connally was also from Texas. He was the governor, and he was shot with JFK. And Ann Richards, who is a very liberal-leaning governor, there you go, she was a governor. Utah saw Brigham Young, a Mormon leader who was the territorial governor. And there we go. And Reed Smoot, who was a senator who worked with the Senator Hawley, a different Hawley, not the one we have today, on the Smoot-Hawley tariff, which was the tariff that helped lead to the Great Depression. Yeah? Okay, got that. Then Vermont, Ethan Allen. He was the Green Mountain Boys leader. Now, I have to look that up because I'm wondering, is that like or not like the Proud Boys? Were they a militia? It kind of sounds like that to me. And I know Vermont was also fiercely independent, and maybe that was the contingent that fought in the Civil War and the was it?
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. So we'll have to look that up. As we're doing, we'll probably end up with a short class per state, and we'll definitely answer these questions. Calvin Coolidge, one of my favorite presidents. I don't know much about what he actually did as president. It was his taciturn personality. It was this story that I heard, that a woman got to meet him and was very excited and knew that he had a reputation for never saying more than like 3 words in a sentence. And she said that she had bet whoever, her friends, I don't remember the details of the story, obviously, but she'd made a bet that she could get him to say more than 4 words. And he said, "Madam, you lose." That's what it was. "Madam, you lose." So, in Virginia, George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, 2 presidents who are widely considered to be heroes. I mean, monuments, heroes. But they owned slaves, and at least one of them had babies with a young girl who couldn't possibly be in a position to really consent to anything. And even if women in that situation and men in that situation consented, even if they got a better life out of it, they're not responsible for that situation. It's still rape. I don't care who does it. I don't care what gender any of them are. It's rape. Henry F. Byrd Sr. was a senator and the quote unquote, quote, massive resistance, end quote, leader. Not unquote, because you can't undo your quote, but quote, end quote. Anyway, massive resistance leader. So there's another thing to look up. Massive resistance in Virginia that Byrd, Harry F. Byrd Sr., which sort of implies a famous junior. Washington State, there was Henry M. Jackson, who was a senator for 43 years and was a defense hawk. I know what a war hawk is, but a defense hawk.
Maybe.
Is there a distinction?
Well, maybe they're just big on building up
the nukes?
Or, right.
Okay. Sorry, I interrupted you. And Warren McNewson, who was a senator for 44 years. I think Washington politics actually is different now, though. We have some really interesting Congress people from Washington State. West Virginia, Robert Byrd, senator for 51 years, former KKK member. Just in case you think that the Congress isn't racist. I know, not everyone, right? Gaston Caperton, the 2-term governor, he did something reforming education, which I don't know. Could be good, could be bad. Wisconsin, Robert La Follette, progressive governor and senator. And again, just because they're considered progressive does not mean they'd be considered progressive by today's terms. Their idea of progressive might mean that they wanted to kick out Native Americans and put in an oil pipe, and for that day it was progressive, or mow up a whole bunch of Buffalo area to put in a strip mall. Yeah, things are considered progressive. Things in San Francisco where they got rid of all the old really quaint houses and put in sterile apartment complexes that turned into projects. It was not really progress, but I know a lot of people thought so at the time. And even when I was a kid, there was a lot of talk about things that they thought were progressive that turned out to have been icky. So, I mean, I don't know. What am I saying? I'm saying progress can be icky, and people who want certain types of progress are not progressive the way we politically use the word today. That's what I'm trying to say. Joseph McCarthy came from Wisconsin. He was a senator, and we've talked a bit about this. He was an anti-communist who did things that now we see as witch hunts. He tried to purge this country of communists, but anybody he didn't like for any reason, he was able to say they were a communist and sometimes get them blackballed. Like some people weren't able to make movies anymore, as an example. My theory is now that people like McCarthy are actually fascists who are trying to get rid of every little scrap of anything that's to the left of them. In Wyoming, Nellie Taylor Ross was the first woman governor in the entire United States. So for a state that says Conservative is Wyoming. They had the first woman governor, and Liz Cheney. Shout out to Liz Cheney. Not that I agree with her on almost anything, except Trump. But I do agree with her about Trump. So that takes us through 50 states. That did not do anything for territories. It did not do anything for Washington, D.C. So I think that we may add that in when we actually do the course material. I hope you come back for course number 5 because it's really actually interesting. Talks about all these different countries and the people there and strong men and heroes as well. Next, we're going to get into the actual classes for the courses. So do come back.